The secret I couldn't hide. I never intended for anyone to know the truth about me. Not my friends, not my family, not even myself fully. Yet there I was, crouched behind the living room couch, hands shaking as I held a silky blouse I shouldn't have been wearing, heart pounding like a drum in a quiet, unforgiving room. The house was empty, but the silence felt suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside felt like it might expose me, reveal me as the boy they thought I was. While inside, I was already someone else entirely. It started with curiosity, the kind that sneaks in quietly and insists on being felt. I'd pass my sister's room one evening, drawn by the subtle scent of her perfume, the shimmer of her skirts, the softness of her blouses. I'd touched one, just for a second, my fingers grazing the fabric, and the shock of desire had startled me. But it wasn't just desire, it was recognition. I felt, in that instant, something inside me I couldn't name. Something that had always been there, buried beneath the layers of expectation and shame. Weeks passed in secrecy. I would wait until everyone left the house or fell asleep. Then I would sneak into her wardrobe, choosing a skirt, a blouse, a scarf, and I'd slip into them with trembling hands, heart thudding in equal parts fear and thrill. I looked in the mirror and saw a version of myself that felt more real than the boy who went to school each day, who laughed with his friends, who smiled at teachers' questions. That reflection, soft jawline, gentle curves, delicate hands, and a timid, yet undeniable poise, felt like home. And yet, guilt gnawed at me. I was supposed to be someone else. I was supposed to fit into a mold that never quite fit. Each day, I played the part of the boy everyone expected me to be, speaking in a voice that didn't fully belong, laughing at jokes I didn't always understand, moving in ways that felt foreign. But at night, hidden in the shadows of my own bedroom, I became her, soft, careful, delicate, undeniably me. The first time I dared to walk to the full-length mirror fully dressed, I froze. My reflection startled me, not because I was ashamed, but because it was exactly who I had always been, quietly waiting to be seen. The blouse hugged my shoulders in just the right way, the skirt fell naturally, the scarf brushed against my neck, and for a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that I could exist in this form outside my private world. But fear always returned. What if someone saw me? What if they laughed, or scolded, or worse, tried to erase this version of me before it could even take shape? I thought of my parents, my friends, the world that expected a boy, a student, a version of me that was safe and predictable. The risk of being discovered was terrifying. Yet the pull of my own reflection, my own truth, was stronger. It became ritual, my secret life unfolding in stolen moments. I learned the subtlety of movement, how to tilt my head just slightly, how to walk quietly so no one would notice my shift in balance, how to breathe in a way that made me feel more graceful. Every day, I honed this hidden self, and with every passing moment, I realized the girl I was discovering wasn't an escape. She was me, and I was falling, slowly, irrevocably, into her. Yet even as I embraced her, I felt the tension of the unknown. How long could I hide? How long before the world demanded I choose between safety and truth, between boy and girl, between the life I had and the life I craved? That question haunted me, a whisper beneath the thrill, a shadow beneath the glow. One evening, after a particularly tense day at school, I found myself trembling in front of the mirror again. My hands shook, my heart raced, but my eyes held steady. I traced my reflection with fingertips, memorizing the soft lines, the gentle curves, the delicate posture I had cultivated in secret. I whispered quietly, almost to myself, "Someday they'll see you. Someday you'll be me fully." And in that quiet, shivering moment, I realized the journey had already begun. The boy the world knew was fading, and in the shadows of secrecy, the girl I had always been was awakening. Stolen moments and silent yearning. The mornings were always the hardest. I would wake early, before anyone else stirred, and lie in bed listening to the distant hum of the neighborhood. Birds chirped, leaves rustled, but all I could hear was the rapid drumming of my own heart. I would imagine the day ahead: classes, conversations, casual laughter, and the heavy weight of pretending once again. Each smile I forced felt like a mask pressed too tightly against my skin, and each laugh a performance I wasn't sure I could sustain. By the time everyone left the house, I was already shaking with anticipation. The first stolen moments of solitude were electric. I would dart to my sister's room or the closet she had carelessly left unlocked, selecting garments with trembling fingers. A soft blouse, a flowing skirt, a scarf with the faint scent of her perfume — these were the keys to another world, a world where I could breathe. Dressing took longer than I expected. Every button fastened was a silent promise to myself. Every fold smoothed was a whispered affirmation. When I finally stood before the mirror fully dressed, I sometimes forgot to breathe. The reflection staring back was not timid or uncertain. She had poise, grace, and something far more powerful: authenticity. But the thrill of discovery always wrestled with fear. I imagined someone walking in, a parent perhaps, or a friend dropping by unexpectedly. The thought made my chest tighten and my hands shake. Yet, even in fear, I couldn't stop. I had discovered a part of me that refused to be ignored, and each secret session reinforced it. Some afternoons, I practiced moving, slowly, deliberately. I learned how to tilt my head in ways that felt natural, how to shift weight gracefully from one foot to the other, how to soften gestures without seeming awkward. Each small motion built the invisible scaffolding of her, the girl I had kept locked away for so long. School was a battlefield of expectations. I watched my classmates carefully, noting how effortlessly they carried themselves. Every day, I compared their ease to my hidden anxiety, longing for a freedom I could not yet claim. I envied the girls who walked through the hallways with unshakable confidence, wishing I could step into their shoes without trembling. And yet, a spark inside told me that one day, I would become that person. The tension built in quiet, nearly imperceptible ways. A misplaced book in the hallway, an accidental glance, the brush of someone's hand near mine. Each incident sent ripples of panic through me. I learned to control my breathing, to steady my voice, to fold myself into the shadows. But the girl in the mirror grew stronger with each passing day, her presence undeniable. At night, I would retreat to my sanctuary, my bedroom. I would linger before the mirror, touching the lines of my reflection, memorizing every subtle curve, every graceful angle I had learned to claim. My whisper broke the silence. Someday, I won't have to hide. The words trembled, uncertain yet hopeful. And even as fear pressed against the edges of my mind, excitement surged through me. I was discovering not only who I could be, but who I truly was. One evening, after the house had fallen silent, I dared to wear a skirt outside my room for the first time, tiptoeing into the hallway. The floorboards creaked under my weight, each sound threatening exposure. My heart raced, and I froze, imagining footsteps approaching. But no one came. I made it to the living room mirror, and there she was, the girl who had always existed beneath the surface, finally claiming her space. I traced her reflection with trembling fingertips. My voice caught in my throat as I whispered again, more firmly this time. I'm here. I'm real. And I won't go back. The night was quiet, but the moment was seismic. I had stepped further into her world, dared to exist beyond the shadows, and touched a freedom I had never known. The journey was only beginning, and I could already feel the path stretching ahead, challenging, thrilling, terrifying, and utterly mine. Balancing two worlds, days blended into weeks, and my secret life became a delicate dance, a constant balancing act between the boy the world expected me to be and the girl I was learning to embrace. At school, I moved like a shadow of my own self, careful to smile, to nod, to laugh in the right places. Every step, every word was rehearsed in my mind before I uttered it. I was performing a role, yes, but it was the only way to survive. Yet, in the quiet moments at home, everything shifted. I could shed the mask, let my shoulders relax, and move with a grace I had been denied in public. Clothes, once mere fabric, became tools of liberation. A flowing skirt, a delicate blouse, the soft touch of a scarf. Each item was a bridge to a version of me that felt whole, alive, undeniable. One afternoon, I dared something new. My parents were out, the house empty, and I slipped into one of my favorite outfits, a soft, lilac blouse and a skirt that swayed with each step. I walked slowly through the living room, feeling the floorboards beneath my feet, my reflection catching in the mirror. For a fleeting moment, I imagined someone seeing me, recognizing me, acknowledging that I was already here, already real. My heart raced with equal parts terror and exhilaration. School brought new challenges. One day, a friend, the closest I had, joked about skirts and dresses, unaware of how intensely it struck me. My palms grew sweaty, my throat tight, yet I forced a laugh. I had to protect my secret at all costs. The fear of exposure was always lurking, a shadow threatening to erase the girl I had nurtured in private. But it was also during these moments that I realized the depth of my desire to be seen as her, not just in secret but in the world. The girl in me longed for acknowledgement, for validation, for a chance to breathe fully without fear. The tension between hiding and expressing grew more intense, gnawing at my resolve. One evening, exhausted from pretending all day, I returned home and allowed myself a long look in the mirror. I traced her face, her shoulders, the gentle curves I had come to know intimately. I whispered her name, the name I hadn't yet dared to use in public, and it felt like a prayer, a promise to myself.
Soon.
Soon you'll be free. The thrill of anticipation mingled with fear. What would it feel like to walk outside, to let the world see her? Could I survive the scrutiny, the judgment, the questions? And yet, even in doubt, I felt a spark of courage, a growing certainty that this version of me, delicate, refined, vulnerable, and strong, was worth every risk. I began practicing small gestures in secret, tilting my head just so, walking with a subtle sway, softening my voice. These were not affectations, but rehearsals for a life I longed to claim. The tension was constant, but so was the exhilaration. Each movement, each quiet triumph, was proof that the girl within me was alive and unstoppable. By the end of that week, I realized something extraordinary. I had begun to merge the two worlds, finding small ways to bring her into the daylight without revealing too much. A subtle gesture here, a softer tone there, breadcrumbs of authenticity, shared with no one, yet giving me an unshakable sense of self. And in the quiet of my room that night, I let the thought bloom. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was preparing for the day when the world would finally see her, not as a secret, not as a fantasy, but as me. First steps into the light. The morning sunlight spilled through the curtains, casting long, golden lines across my bedroom floor. I had been awake for hours, unable to sleep, thinking about the small, impossible act I was planning. Today, for the first time, I would leave my room fully dressed as her, not hidden in a hallway, not behind the sanctuary of my bedroom door, but stepping out into the living room, the house, the world, even if only briefly. I dressed slowly, deliberately. A soft pink blouse, flowing just enough to feel feminine without drawing unnecessary attention, a skirt that brushed my knees, and shoes that were comfortable yet gave me a subtle lift in posture. My hair fell naturally over my shoulders, brushed but not perfected, and I applied a touch of lip balm. Everything was mine. Every choice, every movement, every small detail was an assertion of the person I was becoming. I took a deep breath and opened the bedroom door. The hallway stretched ahead, silent, empty, the faint morning hum of the world outside seeping in through the windows. My heart pounded, every step deliberate, every sound amplified in my own ears. I walked slowly, savoring the sensation of being fully present, fully visible, fully herself. When I reached the living room, I froze. The space was ordinary, but for me, it was monumental. A single window caught my reflection, and I saw her fully for the first time outside the private shadows of my bedroom. The girl I had nurtured in secret, the version of me that trembled with fear yet glowed with quiet confidence, stood tall. And I realized something. I was no longer performing. I was existing. The fear, though, had not disappeared. I imagined someone walking in, a parent, a friend, a neighbor. The thought made my chest tighten, but beneath it, a flicker of exhilaration surged. I was testing myself, pushing the boundaries of safety, and feeling the thrill of claiming space that had always been denied. I moved to the mirror on the wall, tracing the lines of her face, the curve of her shoulders, the sway of her skirt. My fingertips lingered on her reflection, as though trying to memorize every subtle detail. "You are real," I whispered, "and you will not hide forever." That afternoon, emboldened by my first small victory, I ventured further. The house was empty, the street quiet, and I stepped outside briefly, just to the porch. The sunlight kissed my skin, highlighting the soft pink of my blouse, the gentle curve of my skirt, and the tentative confidence that pulsed through my movements. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. I flinched, my pulse quickening, but I held my posture, lifted my chin, and reminded myself, the world does not define me. I define me. Returning inside, I felt a surge of pride. These moments, small as they were revolutionary. Each step outside my private sanctuary, each moment of visibility, however brief, was a declaration I existed. I was real, and I was no longer entirely confined to shadows. Yet even in this triumph, doubt lingered. What if someone discovered me? What if the carefully constructed balance between the boy the world expected and the girl I was becoming collapsed? Fear was always present, a quiet shadow reminding me of risk. And yet, excitement burned brighter. That evening, I lingered in front of the mirror longer than usual. I practiced tilting my head, walking with poise, letting my hands fall naturally at my sides. I whispered to her again, "You are ready. Soon, the world will see you, and you will not falter." The night was quiet, but inside me, a storm of anticipation brewed. I realized that these small steps, though private and seemingly insignificant, were the beginning of something profound. I was testing the waters, feeling the thrill of courage, and discovering the extraordinary power of existing fully as myself, even when no one else could yet witness it. By the end of that week, I began to understand something remarkable. I was no longer just a secret hiding in shadows. I was becoming someone who could, one day, face the world fully, unafraid. And that knowledge, more than any garment, more than any reflection, filled me with an unshakable sense of hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt the contours of a life I had always longed for, fragile, yes, but undeniably real, and waiting for me to claim it fully. First steps into the public eye. The city felt alive in a way my small suburban street never did. Cars hummed past, distant conversations drifted through the air, and the faint smell of baked bread and exhaust mixed in a strange but comforting cocktail of normalcy. I stood on the edge of the sidewalk, heart hammering, hands slightly trembling, my reflection faintly visible in the darkened window of a nearby shop. Today, for the first time, I would take her, the girl I had nurtured in secret, into the outside world beyond my family home. I had rehearsed this moment endlessly in my bedroom, walking back and forth in front of mirrors, adjusting posture, the tilt of my head, the soft sway of my skirt, the subtle grace of my movements. Every detail had been perfected in private, yet now, standing here with the morning light warming my face, perfection seemed irrelevant. What mattered was existence, pure, undeniable, visible existence. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my fears pressing against my chest. What if someone stared? What if someone laughed? What if I faltered, my carefully constructed persona crumbling in an instant? The old instincts whispered to retreat, to turn back into the shadows of secrecy where I had always been safe. But the girl in me, the real me, surged forward with quiet determination. I reminded myself of the countless hours of practice, the whispered affirmations in front of the mirror, the trembling hands that had learned to fold, to adjust, to claim this body as my own. This was not a game. This was life. And it was mine. I stepped off the curb. Each step felt monumental, my shoes clicking softly against the pavement, a delicate rhythm that mirrored the quiet thrum of my heart. People passed by, some glancing, some indifferent. My chest tightened with each observation, yet I held my head high, chin lifted, shoulders back, and arms falling naturally at my sides. A woman pushing a stroller smiled briefly in my direction. My lips curved into a small, tentative smile, and something inside me lifted, a spark of connection, of acknowledgement, of existing without apology. My pulse slowed, my steps grew steadier, and I realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. I wandered through the small square near the cafe I had discovered weeks ago. Children played with frisbees, a couple argued quietly by a fountain, and the faint scent of flowers drifted from a nearby market stall. The world was alive, chaotic, and beautiful, and I was a part of it. And yet, even in this triumph, tension lingered. A man walked past, pausing briefly, his gaze lingering just a moment too long. My chest constricted, my hands felt heavy, but I held my posture, held my breath, and moved past him. When he finally turned away, I exhaled slowly, the tiniest grin creeping onto my face. I had survived. I had existed fully in the public eye, even if only for a few fleeting moments. Returning home later that afternoon, I felt an unfamiliar weight, not fear, but exhilaration. Every step outside had been a test, and I had passed. I thought of Clara, of her lessons, of the countless hours of guidance, but I also understood something crucial. The transformation was no longer about instruction. It was about choice, courage, and claiming ownership of myself. That evening, I lingered longer in front of my bedroom mirror than usual. I traced the curves I had come to recognize intimately, the delicate line of my jaw, the soft slope of my shoulders, the careful tilt of my hips. I whispered to her, to me, to the reflection that had become my truth. You are real. You exist. And the world will see you. The thrill of anticipation mingled with fear. I knew the journey was only beginning. The outside world could be cruel, unforgiving, and indifferent. But I also knew something deeper. The girl I had nurtured in secret, the girl who had trembled behind closed doors, was stronger now. She had tasted freedom in small, stolen moments, and she would not turn back. That night, as I lay in bed, the city lights filtering through the curtains, I felt a quiet certainty growing inside me. Fear would always exist, lurking like a shadow, but it could not erase who I was. I had taken the first steps into the light, and each step had strengthened me. I closed my eyes, feeling the rhythm of my own heartbeat, and whispered one final promise. Tomorrow I will go further. And I will not hide. I will not falter. I will be seen. The first recognition. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain that had fallen overnight. I had planned today carefully. My outfit was simple yet deliberate. A soft cream blouse tucked into a flowing skirt, comfortable flats, hair brushed but untamed. Every detail mattered, not because anyone else would notice immediately, but because it mattered to me. Each choice was an act of ownership, of claiming space in a world that had so often felt impossible to navigate. Stepping outside, I felt the familiar mix of exhilaration and terror. The streets were waking up, neighbors walking dogs, shopkeepers setting up their stands, and the hum of early traffic filling the air. Each step felt weighty, significant, yet liberating. I wasn't hiding anymore, not entirely. Today, I would test how far I could extend the world's boundaries before it pushed back. I wandered toward the small cafe I had discovered weeks ago. It had become a quiet sanctuary, a place where I could step into public visibility in measured doses. As I approached, a woman exiting the cafe glanced my way, offering a warm, brief smile. My heart leapt, and I returned the gesture with careful composure. It was fleeting, yet the acknowledgement felt monumental. Inside, I took a seat near the window, sipping tea slowly, deliberately. The reflections of my image in the glass were doubled by the street outside, layering the girl I had nurtured in secret over the world that had never truly seen her. And then it happened. A stranger, a woman a few tables away, turned and looked at me more closely than anyone had before. Her eyes lingered, assessing, curious, but not judgmental. There was something in her gaze, a quiet recognition that stirred my heart and shook my confidence simultaneously. My chest tightened. I wanted to retreat, to vanish, but I stayed, rooted in the courage I had been cultivating for months. She smiled faintly, just enough to acknowledge me without words, and I returned it. That brief connection, so subtle yet profound, was a validation I had been craving but hadn't dared to hope for. For a moment, it felt as though my existence, my true self, had been seen and quietly accepted. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of nerves and small triumphs. Each glance from passers-by, each polite nod or smile, became a test of my fortitude. Some moments brought anxiety, a child staring too long, a man with raised eyebrows, but they were outweighed by the steady realization that I could hold myself in the world and not falter. Returning home, I lingered before the mirror, running my hands along the lines of my reflection. The girl I had nurtured in secret was no longer trembling, no longer entirely hidden. She had begun to occupy space, to assert herself, even in small, quiet ways. I whispered softly, more to the reflection than anyone else. You are seen. You are real. And this is just the beginning. That evening, I allowed myself to linger in the feeling of possibility. The outside world had acknowledged me, even if only subtly. It had tested me, yes, but it had also affirmed me. For the first time, I felt the fragile, thrilling sense that the world might not only tolerate me, it might, in time, accept me. As I lay in bed that night, I thought of tomorrow. I would go further. I would allow more of her into the daylight. I would step closer to the life I had always imagined, fully, without hesitation. And I knew, deep down, that each small step was preparing me for something far larger, far more profound than I could yet comprehend. The first recognition had been subtle, fleeting, yet transformative. It was proof that my existence, my true self, could survive outside the shadows. And it ignited a fire within me, a quiet but unstoppable determination to see just how far I could go, how fully I could be her in the world. A test in the open. The afternoon sun slanted sharply through the classroom windows, casting long, bright rectangles across the floor. I had always dreaded this part of the day, the hours spent confined among peers, expected to perform a role I didn't fully inhabit. Today, though, something had shifted. The girl I had nurtured in secret was no longer entirely hidden. A subtle change in posture, a softening of my movements, a careful tilt of my head, each action whispered confidence into a room that had never truly seen me. But confidence is fragile, and reality has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. It started subtly. A classmate, someone I barely spoke to, had noticed the softness in my mannerisms, the gentleness in my gestures, the way my voice occasionally slipped into a higher, more natural tone. At first, I convinced myself it was imagination. Yet the sidelong glances continued, quick enough to avoid detection but unmistakable to me. My chest tightened with anxiety, my hands curled lightly around my notebook, and I realized that the quiet world I had built in my private sanctuary was colliding with the harsh reality of scrutiny. A group of students gathered near the back, laughing about something trivial, but their eyes occasionally flicked toward me. Every glance felt magnified, every whisper felt like judgment. My heart raced, my breathing quickened, and I felt that old, familiar pull, the instinct to hide, to shrink, to disappear entirely. But this time, something inside me resisted. I reminded myself of the months spent cultivating poise, the long hours in front of the mirror, the countless stolen moments where I had learned to inhabit this body, this identity fully. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and allowed the subtle sway of my skirt to align with a natural rhythm I had practiced tirelessly. It was then that the moment crystallized, a challenge I could not avoid. A teacher asked a question aloud, and I answered, my voice soft but steady, carrying the nuances I had worked so hard to cultivate. The room fell quiet for just a moment, and I felt every eye on me. The subtle recognition, the flicker of surprise, it was both terrifying and exhilarating. I had been forced into the spotlight without planning it, yet I held my ground. My hands rested gently on my desk, my gaze unwavering, my presence undeniable. After class, the whispers began. Not cruel, not openly hostile, but curious, questioning. I walked the hallways with careful steps, heart pounding, mind alert to every flicker of attention. Some students smiled politely, others avoided eye contact, and a few whispered just loudly enough for me to catch. Each interaction was a test, a probe into the authenticity of the persona I had been cultivating in private. Returning home, I felt the weight of the day pressing down on me. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught my eyes, and I froze. There she was, the girl I had nurtured in secret, now facing the consequences of being noticed. A faint smile crept onto my lips, not from relief, but from recognition. I had survived scrutiny, survived curiosity, survived subtle judgment. And I had emerged intact, perhaps even stronger. Clara's words echoed softly in my mind. The world will notice you, but you must decide if you are ready to be fully seen. I realized for the first time that the choice was mine entirely. The scrutiny of others did not define me. My response to it did. And in that quiet evening, alone in my room, I allowed myself a moment of pride. I had walked a tightrope, balanced between secrecy and exposure, fear and courage, and I had not fallen. Lying in bed later, I traced the contours of my reflection in the darkened window. I whispered to her, to myself, to the girl who had existed only in shadows. You are ready. The world may test you, but you will not break. And soon you will no longer hide. The day had been exhausting, terrifying, exhilarating, and transformative. And I knew that the path ahead would bring greater challenges, moments where fear would threaten to overwhelm courage, where judgment would seek to erase confidence, where the line between secrecy and authenticity would blur. But for the first time, I felt the quiet, unstoppable truth. I was capable. I was real. And no test, no glance, no whisper could undo the life I was beginning to claim as my own. Venturing further into the world. The sun hung low in the sky, its golden glow filtering through the trees, painting the sidewalks with warm streaks of light. Today was different. Today, I wasn't just stepping into the living room, the hallway, or even the familiar streets near home. Today, I would venture further, into the world beyond the edges I had cautiously mapped in my mind. I dressed deliberately, as I always did, but there was an added layer of care today. A soft blouse in muted cream, a skirt that swayed gracefully with each step, and flats that allowed me to move confidently without drawing unnecessary attention. My hair fell naturally over my shoulders, brushed but soft, framing the reflection of her in the mirror. I studied her carefully, the girl I had nurtured in secrecy, now preparing to meet the world. My heart raced as I stepped outside. The city was alive, humming with movement, voices, and endless possibilities. Every step felt monumental, like the pavement beneath my feet was both a challenge and a promise. I held my head high, chin slightly lifted, shoulders back, and moved with a rhythm I had cultivated through months of quiet practice. Each motion was deliberate, yet effortlessly hers. I walked toward the nearby square, where vendors were setting up stands, children played, and couples strolled, unhurried, lost in their own worlds. People passed by, some noticing me, others not. Each glance I caught, a fleeting look from a passerby, a smile from a stranger, a nod from someone across the street, filled me with a strange, intoxicating affirmation. I existed. I was here. And the world could no longer ignore her presence entirely. And then it happened. A young woman sitting on a bench glanced my way. Her eyes lingered just a moment longer than politeness required. There was curiosity, yes, but also a quiet acknowledgement. A recognition of my existence, of my truth, without a word spoken. My chest tightened, pulse quickened, but I held my posture. I returned her gaze with a soft, confident smile, and for a brief, shining moment, the world felt like it was opening a door I had never dared to touch before. I wandered further, exploring streets I had always avoided. The thrill of exposure mingled with fear, creating a cocktail of adrenaline that I had never experienced in my private sanctuary. Each step was both terrifying and liberating. I imagined someone noticing me, questioning me, judging me, yet I pressed on. My identity, nurtured in secret for so long, demanded space, and I could no longer deny it. The subtle swish of my skirt, the soft rhythm of my steps, the gentle tilt of my head, they were all declarations. Each movement whispered to the world, I exist. I am here. I am me. And with every acknowledgement, however fleeting, I felt myself growing stronger. Returning home later that afternoon, I lingered before the mirror in my bedroom. The girl I had cultivated in secret now stared back at me fully, not hidden, not trembling, not apologetic. Her presence was undeniable, her posture strong, her eyes reflecting a quiet triumph. I whispered softly, almost reverently, You have taken the first steps into the world, and you will take many more. The world may be vast, but you belong in it. The evening stretched before me, calm yet charged with possibility. I knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, moments of doubt, scrutiny, and fear, but I had tasted freedom, even if only briefly. And that taste, sweet and heady, was enough to drive me forward. For the first time, I felt what it meant to not only exist in secret but to stake a claim in the world, however small, however fleeting, however bold. I was no longer entirely hidden. I was alive. I was her. And tomorrow I would go further. The moment that changed everything. The late afternoon light filtered through the city streets, warm and golden, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across my own uncertainty. I had planned today carefully. Today was not just another cautious stroll through familiar streets. Today, I would venture into the cafe I had always admired from afar, the one with large windows, the smell of fresh pastries, and a sense of life I had longed to be part of. I dressed with deliberate care, as always, yet there was an unspoken nervousness that made my hands tremble slightly as I tied my hair back, adjusted the hem of my skirt, and smoothed the soft fabric of my blouse over my shoulders. Each movement was a whisper of reassurance, a silent affirmation that the girl in the mirror had grown stronger, braver, more determined to claim her space. Stepping outside, I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. Every step on the sunlit pavement was a test of courage, each glance from a passer-by a subtle challenge. I could no longer hide entirely. The world was vast, and yet, within it, there was a space I could occupy, a small yet vital space for her. Inside the cafe, the smell of coffee and warm bread enveloped me. The room buzzed with life. People chatting, reading, working quietly on laptops. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the countless hours of preparation, the months of practice in front of mirrors, the careful cultivation of poise and grace. This was more than a test of courage. It was a step toward existence without apology. I chose a seat near the window, fingers tracing the edge of the table, heart pounding in rhythm with my own thoughts. And then I noticed her, a stranger sitting across the room, eyes lingering on me just slightly longer than usual. There was no judgment, no cruelty, only recognition.
She saw me.
She saw her. The subtle acknowledgement hit me like a wave. I felt the tightness in my chest, the nervous flutter in my stomach, but I held my posture, chin lifted, shoulders relaxed. I returned her gaze with a quiet, confident smile, a gesture that conveyed everything my words could not. I exist. I am real. I am me. The moment stretched, suspended in a fragile, golden bubble. And then, As if sensing the weight of it, she smiled softly, a small curve of understanding and acceptance. My breath caught. No one had ever seen me like this, in public, fully present, fully herself. And yet here was proof that existence, courage, and truth could pierce the veil of fear. Time seemed to slow. Every detail became monumental. The gentle sway of my skirt, the soft curve of my shoulders, the tilt of my head, the quiet rhythm of my heartbeat. For the first time, I felt fully visible and yet completely safe, acknowledged without words, recognized without scrutiny, celebrated without explanation. When she finally looked away, the spell broke, and I exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and exhilaration coursing through me. I had survived not just the scrutiny of the outside world, but the judgment I had always feared within myself. I had faced a mirror larger than glass, a reflection composed of reality and possibility, and I had not faltered. Returning home, I lingered before the mirror for what felt like hours. I traced every line of my face, every curve of my body, every subtle nuance I had cultivated in private but was now asserting in the world. I whispered softly, reverently, "You have been seen. You have been acknowledged. And tomorrow, you will step further into life, unafraid and unhidden." That night, lying in bed, I understood something profound. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is standing tall even when fear presses in, even when the world seems vast and indifferent, even when every instinct tells you to hide. I had taken that step, and I knew, deep within, that my journey toward becoming fully herself, fully seen, fully alive, was now unstoppable. The city outside glimmered, alive with possibilities, and I whispered once more into the quiet of my room. Tomorrow I go further. Tomorrow I am not afraid. Tomorrow I will be free. Fully seen, fully me. The first light of dawn spilled gently across my bedroom floor, illuminating the contours of my reflection in the mirror. Today felt different. Not just another day of cautious practice or stolen moments of freedom, but a day of reckoning, a day of arrival. I traced my fingers along my jawline, over my shoulders, across the subtle curve of my waist, and felt the quiet yet unshakable truth. This body, this reflection, this person I had nurtured in secret for so long, was mine. Fully, undeniably mine. I dressed carefully, as always, yet there was no longer the nervous trembling that had accompanied my early explorations. A soft blouse of pale lavender, a flowing skirt that brushed gracefully over my knees, shoes that allowed me to glide rather than stumble, each choice deliberate, each movement an assertion of self. My hair fell naturally, untamed yet perfect in its imperfection, framing the face of the girl who had existed in shadows for so long. Stepping outside, the city greeted me with the same familiar hum of life. Cars passing, children laughing, the aroma of freshly baked bread mingling with exhaust fumes. But today it was different. Today, the streets felt like an extension of the sanctuary I had spent months creating within myself. Today, I did not shrink. Today, I claimed space. Every step I took was deliberate, yet effortless. My posture was straight, shoulders relaxed, head held high, the subtle sway of my skirt punctuating the rhythm of my stride. For the first time, I felt entirely in sync with her, the girl I had nurtured in secret, the person I had longed to be, now moving boldly through the world as herself. I wandered toward the small square near the cafe, the one that had become a place of quiet courage. Familiar faces nodded politely, strangers glanced with curiosity, and yet none of it unsettled me. I realized that validation did not need to come from others. It came from within, from the countless hours of practice, the whispered affirmations, the trembling hands that had finally learned to hold themselves with confidence. As I reached the cafe, I paused briefly, looking at my reflection in the glass window. The girl staring back at me smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that spoke of endurance, resilience, and courage. I entered and took a seat by the window, feeling the warmth of sunlight fall across my face. I sipped my tea slowly, deliberately, savoring each sensation, each breath, each heartbeat. And then, unexpectedly, someone acknowledged me. A stranger, kind and unassuming, who offered a small smile as our eyes met. In that moment, I understood fully what had been building for months. The world could see me, and I could remain whole. I was no longer hidden. I was no longer afraid. I was fully present, fully alive, fully her. The days stretched on, filled with small triumphs. Each glance, each interaction, each subtle acknowledgement from the world reinforced what I had long known in private. The girl I had nurtured, the person I had protected and cherished in secret, was real. She was visible, and she was unstoppable. Returning home, I lingered before the mirror one last time that evening. I studied every detail, the gentle curve of my lips, the softness of my shoulders, the tilt of my head, the poise in my posture. I whispered softly, reverently, as I had countless times before. You are seen. You are real. You are whole. And the world will never take that from you. The months of secret practice, the stolen moments of discovery, the trembling, the fear, the courage, all had led to this moment. I understood, in a way I never had before, that transformation was not just about appearance or clothing, but about claiming ownership of every quiet, private, unseen part of myself. Transformation was about embracing truth, facing fear, and moving forward even when the world seemed vast and indifferent. That night, as I lay in bed, I closed my eyes and felt the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. For the first time in my life, I could say with certainty, I am her. I am me. And no shadow of doubt, no fleeting moment of fear, could erase the person I had become. The journey had begun in secret, behind closed doors, in whispers and reflections, and it had carried me into the light of the world. And now, fully seen, fully alive, fully me, I knew one undeniable truth. I would never look back. The girl I had been hiding, the self I had longed to embrace, had finally stepped into the world, not trembling, not apologizing, not shrinking, but radiant, confident, and whole. And in that quiet, transformative moment, I understood what it truly meant to be free. I was no longer a secret. I was her. I was me. I was unstoppable.